and welcome to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about all components of business and how to utilize them for exponential growth. My name is Athin Cassiotis. I'm a business growth expert who help business owners grow and scale to create wealth and freedom. Today, I have an awesome guest. His name is Jackson Millan, and he's the wealth mentor and CEO and co-founder of Aureus Financial. And Jackson has spent the last 15 years helping service businesses understand the language of money and manufacture financial freedom for themselves and their families. And he successfully helped over 1,000 clients build in excess of $2 billion in combined wealth and has scaled multiple seven-figure businesses. And he is a master of helping business owners make more work for them and turn their business profit into personal wealth. Welcome, Jackson Millan, and thank you for being on my show.
Mate, thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a chat today.
Definitely, mate. I'm sure it's going to be a great show for everyone watching and listening today. So firstly, you're a successful entrepreneur. So for those people who don't know who you are, please introduce yourself by telling us more about you and your journey.
Yes, mate. So I started my career over 15 years ago because my parents were business owners. My mum was a hairdresser, dad was a tradie, and they worked incredibly hard, but they never had much left over. We always had a roof over our head and we always had food on the table, but there was never any excess. And my parents always said to me, like, Jackson, if you want to be successful, you've got to work hard for it. And I felt like something was wrong, because the reality was that they were just making enough to make ends meet. They could never get ahead. We never had a lot of freedom or flexibility. So I decided that I wanted to create a catalyst for change, and I started training to become a financial advisor when I left school. Now, the first issue was that when I was in the advice industry and observing what the environment was, it was very different to what I thought it was going to be. And what I realized is that the advice industry was very much only interested in helping wealthy people get wealthier and sell commission-based products to people like my parents who, quite frankly, didn't need them. And it definitely wasn't going to help them create financial freedom. So I almost quit. But as I was kind of thinking and considering exiting, the thought crossed my mind, like, Jackson, if you don't fix this, who will? And I started calling myself a wealth coach. I designed an educational-based syllabus specifically to help people like my parents when they were just getting started on their wealth journey. And I've helped thousands of people through that process over the better part of the last decade. And we've helped our clients amass over $2 billion in combined wealth. And I'm fortunate enough to have created financial freedom at 34. So we now have a 70-acre animal sanctuary that we've set up as a passion project. We've rescued over 100 animals. Our latest was actually over the weekend in some big storms. We rescued a little baby fig bird that we're having to feed every 30 minutes, which is exhausting, but it's an amazing experience. And that's been the journey so far, mate.
Yeah, awesome, mate. What a journey. And out of necessity, so to speak, when you see a challenge there, a problem, and go, how can I, better myself, get that knowledge? And then, yeah, amazing. I'm sure that property would be very cool and a great way to give back, and everything like that. So I'll have to check it out one day, I'm sure, to come up Queensland, mate, and go from there.
You're always welcome.
Cheers, mate. So let's talk about wealth now. And I think this is a broad term, right? And it can be defined very differently. So I'd love to know from your perspective, like, what is wealth to you?
Yes. So wealth to me, and you're right, there's so many terms that are thrown around in regards to wealth. Some of them are spiritual, some of them are very objective. So as a finance guy, I try and keep very objective. There's definitely an element of mindset and inner game when it comes to creating and maintaining wealth. But fundamentally, wealth is always the assets that you have that work for you, that are disconnected from the amount of effort invested to have them work for you. So your wealth should be your business, property, and shares. And if you accumulate those three things in the right way and structure them appropriately, they should work for you 24/7, 365 with no sick leave, no annual leave. They become your number one employees that work for you tirelessly, that give you freedom and flexibility around how you live your life. That is fundamentally what wealth means.
Yeah, love it, mate. Great definition there. And, to start the ball rolling today. And there's the term financial freedom, I guess, that everybody wants, right, at the same time. And I guess, and that can look different for everybody, right, depending on what everybody wants. So if someone says, oh, I want financial freedom, or, I guess, what does it mean? But where do we go for that to go, okay, well, how do we create this so that we're using those, those assets that you've been talking about with wealth to be able to get there, as quickly as possible to then, look at different things and what we want in life?
Yeah, here's the challenge, mate, that particularly in entrepreneurship and for business owners, we often get lost in the ambiguities of these throwaway buzzwords, right? And I like to simplify things because unless you can get really clear on the outcomes that you want and define the destination, your ability to get there is going to be incredibly limited, in some cases impossible. So I simplify financial freedom into two things. You're able to own your home outright, because once you own your home and the debt is completely paid off, the amount of freedom and flexibility that that provides you, along with the amount of financial pressure that it takes off your requirement to build wealth, is substantial. So I think everyone should own their home and have it paid off in full. The second thing is that you need to have enough passive income that gives you the freedom and flexibility to choose what you do with your time. Now, importantly, most of my clients do not retire. I can count on one hand the amount of my clients that have completely stopped working, because when you love what you do, you don't want to stop working. You just want to remove the financial pressure from having to work for the production of income. So the idea is that we want to have enough passive income where you can pursue your passions without having to worry about money. And what I found in my experience, mate, is that for the vast majority of my clients, that number is around about $150,000 a year, anywhere up to $500,000 a year, which is a huge variance. So what's important for everyone is that you need to define what we call your financial freedom figure. And I'll share with you some frameworks as we continue that'll help you get clearer on that number.
Yeah, love it, mate. Love the way you've broken that down, and yeah, great method to create that platform. So then, yeah, we can do what we want to be doing in life, not just because we have to do it. So love that part there, and you touched on it there as well about having like a goal or a target, right? And I guess reverse engineering that. It's like in business, it's a similar thing, right? You reverse engineer things in business, same thing for your wealth. So where should we start here? And what are some of these steps, I guess, in going, okay, well, how do we start to get there? Because maybe, for the people that are listening, we're not there right now.
Yes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get out of trying to keep up with the Joneses. For the vast majority of people who come to me, because we exclusively work with business owners, we're ambitious, right? We want to achieve amazing things. We want to change the world. We want to be the first, the best, the only, whatever it might be, right? And that often starts seeping into wealth, which should be measured very, very differently than your entrepreneurial pursuits. And the issue is that so many people are chasing things because it's what society has told them they should chase, and doesn't actually intrinsically motivate them. And then they wonder why. It's like pushing against these invisible ceilings of why they can't get them, because fundamentally they don't want them. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get crystal clear on what it is that you want. And with all of our clients, we help facilitate an exercise that's called the 20-year roadmap. Now, it sounds scary, but I developed this exercise because I struggled with this myself in my earlier days. I've got ADHD, and one of those things that comes with ADHD is the inability to defer gratification. So I find it really difficult to save for future Jackson because current Jackson wants everything now. And after years of frustration, I realized that it wasn't an absence of means that was the issue. It was an absence of planning, because society has told us that wealth is only created through sacrifice and compromise, or in other words, shrinking yourself wealthy. So if Athin in the future wants to achieve these amazing things, he needs to go without today. And that's fundamentally wrong. And that's counterintuitive to us as entrepreneurs, because we are abundant thinkers, right? So instead, what we need to do is create a plan that allows us to have our cake and eat it too. And I created this exercise called the 20-year roadmap. So what it requires us to do is we need to define all of our lifestyle and financial goals over 1, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. So to clarify, for most people, there's this constant toing and froing between lifestyle, the things that add quality to our life, the holidays, the experiences, the cars we want to drive, the school we want to send our kids to, and then the financial goals, doing the smart things to set our future selves up, buying a house, paying it off, building an investment portfolio, creating passive income, getting the kids into their first property, so on and so forth, right? Now, imagine for a moment that we created the space to be able to define all of those goals, both lifestyle and financial, and then do so over the short, medium, and long term. And then, as you rightly said, reverse engineer that into a single income target. So I could say, Adrian, if you wanted to achieve all of these things and without sacrifice and compromise, all you need to do is hit this income target, and then we reverse engineer that into a profit target, then into a revenue target, then into a client target, we can connect the activity you do every day to the outcomes that are intrinsically motivating to you. And it fundamentally changes the way that you go about working towards your goals. It turns on the lights financially, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that, mate. That was a very powerful section. And I think most business owners don't really know their numbers that well, right? And they're not thinking about it in that whole journey, right? Of the business journey, but also the wealth journey and how it all connects together and how you broke that down. So I think that was very powerful. And then it makes it easy, right? To then think about your daily tasks and targets and things for your weeks and your months and the years and going, okay, well, if I do these things, these actions, then it starts to become predictable, right? In terms of
Correct.
what they're going to create later.
100%. And here's the challenge, mate, that in the Western world, I call this left to right thinking, right? Our logical thinking is that we do the work, we produce the revenue. From the revenue, we incur costs. After we incur our costs, we have a profit. Of that profit, we pay ourselves an income. Of that income, we live a lifestyle. Of that lifestyle, if there's surplus, we commit it to wealth creation. And basically, the things that are important to you are put last. Instead, we do right to left thinking, which is very counterintuitive. And we start with the end in mind, and then we work our way backwards. And it ensures that we have the simplest and most seamless path to get to where we want. And when we implement this for our clients, on average, we increase their household surplus by about 20%. And we shortcut their goals in some cases by decades because we've found the path of least resistance to get them the most optimal path to getting what they want.
Yeah, love it, mate. That's really, really awesome. Let's talk a bit more about profit now, right? Because I think this is an important thing to talk about. And people are, thinking probably like, how much do I put into different things? Because, there's the bit of, I want to reinvest some profit into the business to grow the business, which is important as well. But there's also like, I want to put some, into wealth and other areas like that, right? To then grow the wealth. So what are your thoughts around how we should be looking at profit and then maybe, buckets or areas of where to put it, depending on, where we're at as well.
Yes, I have a really firm and somewhat contentious opinion on this, mate, because most business owners that I have seen that work with us have this excuse that they're reinvesting back into the business. And 9 times out of 10, that reinvestment is just an excuse for poor money management. They are, in fact, not reinvesting back into their business. They are covering cash flow shortfalls due to an inferior financial operating system in their business that they are just trying to disguise as reinvestment to make themselves feel better. It is complete and utter bullshit the vast majority of times. Instead, your business, your first and primary objective is to prove your business model and ensure that it works, and then wean it off reinvestment until you are over 7 figures. And even for most of my 7-figure business clients, they do not require to tip money back in. Their business self-fulfills its own growth because it's been factored into the financial model. So it's my opinion that every single business should be able to produce a 20 to 30% operating profit after its ability to grow. So to give you an example, my own business grows at 30% year on year at 30% operating profit. It is a non-negotiable factor. And we implement that exact same system with all of our clients. And the reason why we do this, mate, is because when we wean our business off the need to reinvest, we are now leveraging behavioral finance principles called Parkinson's Law. Have you heard of it before?
Yes, I have, mate. It's a great law. Tell us
Yes.
more about it.
So for those who don't know, Parkinson's Law governs all of us as human beings because as humans, we use the resources that we have available. So the more resources we have, the more resources we use. Now, a great example is the homework test, right? Back at school, when you had an assignment that you needed to do and you were given 8 weeks to do it, when would you finish it, Athin?
Yeah, it would be the night before, probably.
Exactly, right? Because you've just used the resources you had. But if at the beginning of the assignment that the teacher told you had 4 weeks to do it, when do you think you would have got it done?
Yeah, the night before as well, probably.
Exactly. So the same thing happens with your money. And we refer to this as cash flow creep, also referred to as the scale tax. As businesses grow and scale, they outgrow their financial operating system. And the only way to fix that immediately as a band-aid solution is to throw more money at it. Instead of re-engineering that financial operating system and creating efficiency in the cash flows, we just do the path of least resistance, is just throw more money at it. So we help our clients implement a cash flow structure. We call it the profit mastery machine. And what it allows us to do is to implement Parkinson's law in the business finances. And we also do it in the household. And as a result, we basically are putting the business on a cash flow diet. We are forcing it to show what we call the cash flow bottlenecks. And then we start solving those bottlenecks, which allows us to squeeze more profit and create a more efficient, and in many cases, a higher growth business as a result.
Yeah, awesome, mate. I love that. Very powerful on how you're introducing the first time I've heard of it like that, introducing the Parkinson's law into those processes instead of but it's so true, and I love that. Yeah, it's the same method. You know, if you're going to give yourself 2 hours to do a task, it'll take 2 hours. If you give yourself 1 hour, you'll do it in 1 hour, right? So
Right.
then you can start to think, how can I be better at what I do? It's like you know, even if you're growing your wealth, you know, if you need to work 2 hours on a plan, why not give yourself 1 hour and you probably do the plan then, right? And then, you know, do this.
Bang on.
Do.
And I'm sure everyone listening or watching you do this can attest that as their income has grown throughout the years, their lifestyle has adjusted proportionately, right? Like you went from drinking $10 bottles of wine to $50 bottles of wine. You went from driving a Daewoo Lanos to driving a Lexus. Your holidays went from going to the caravan park to going on flying at the pointy end of the plane. Whatever the scenario may be, that's a prime example of how we experience that cash flow creep and how Parkinson's law plays out. And the only way we fix that is through structure. And the problem is that the vast majority of people, particularly business owners, aren't taught how to structure their finances appropriately. So they end up becoming their own worst enemy, relying on their own behavior and habits, which, as we know, are pretty dangerous for most people. And it only exacerbates the issue the more money you make.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And is this something that is sort of, I guess, measured outside, right, of the numbers? Like, you know, a lot of people have their, you know, their Xero, their MyOb, their QuickBooks, whatever system, right, that they run their financial reports out of. And then this is something outside of it going, okay, what are these inputs? And then what are we doing that then to then look at it either from a spreadsheet or maybe even a dashboard or something like that perspective, yeah?
Yeah, correct. And look, we break this down into three things, mate. There is structure. This is basically how we structure our cash flow, and we basically try and control the actions as they are happening. Second is oversight. It's the use of tools like Xero and QuickBooks and MYOB, which is basically giving us the ability to get transparency on the numbers so we can have informed and educated decisions. And the third factor is behavior. What are your intrinsic habits and the things that you are hardwired to do? And what we've found is that because we've got access to thousands of clients' data, we have benchmarked these things. That structure is 70% of the battle. Because if you structure it properly, it influences the activity as it is happening. So if there's no money in a bank account, let's say, you can't spend it. And that requires you to either transfer money or defer the spending behavior. Whereas tools like budgeting, the dirty B word, right? People hate budgeting. And I put QuickBooks and Xero in that same bucket. It's a retrospective tool. You're only looking at that information once the activity has already happened. So what typically happens? Most people look at it and they go, oh, crap, I feel so bad. I shouldn't have done that. And then they create this negative feedback loop where they just feel guilty, but it actually doesn't address the underlying problem, right? Which is sorted with structure. But the oversight is 20% because we want to make sure that what gets tracked gets measured and what gets measured gets improved. And then the third part is behavior, and that is 10%. But we've got to realize that behavior is reactive to the absence or presence of the other two. So if transparency is not there, then behavior is 30%. And then if the structure is also not there, behavior is 100%. And as we know, as humans, because we haven't been taught this and we're doing things the wrong way, and if you've ever felt guilty about your finances, it's likely that your behaviors, your structure, and your transparency is not serving you. And that's an uphill battle. There's very few people in this world that are intrinsically motivated to endure that pain to change that behavior. So they need structure.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Love that. Really, really powerful. And all those three elements there. You touched on a bit before. Let's talk a little bit more about money mindset, because I think this is a big topic here, right? And, you know, I guess, you know, in creating wealth and just money in the business, or all of those areas. And, you know, us growing up as parents, you would know this, we get a lot of limiting beliefs and other things from our parents, consciously or unconsciously, right? There and how we do that. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about, I guess, some of these mindset beliefs that maybe we should be embodying, like things like that, that we can then help us to, you know, with our behaviors and everything else to align with those structures and you know, how we're measuring and managing everything so that we're getting to where we want to be much quicker.
For sure. Love to, mate. So mindset is a critical part of what we do. And we've spent a lot of time studying behavioral finance principles, which most people just don't even know exist. They just expect that their behavior is what it is. They're born this way. They can't change it. And the idea is that we can change these things. We are not born finance people, right? There's no such thing. I don't believe in it. I believe that you have the choice of whether you want to play an active role in learning the language of money and using money as a tool to be able to enable the highest quality of life and the highest level of impact, if you choose to. But the vast majority of people that I speak to is they go, I'm not a finance person. It doesn't come doesn't come naturally to me. I don't enjoy it. So they abdicate responsibility. And the underlying principle here must be that no one will love your money like you do. You cannot abdicate responsibility to your accountant, to your financial advisor, to your business coach, to your bookkeeper, to your wife, your husband, whoever, right? You must take ownership because no one will love your money like you do. That is the first belief that you need to have. Now, you can outsource certain things, but only from a position of knowing. You need to know the fundamentals. And the biggest mistake I see here, mate, is that people, it's like learning German, right? Imagine that you went to a German lesson and after the first lesson, you were upset because you couldn't speak German fluently. That'd be pretty silly, right?
Definitely.
And I see these ambitious people get frustrated because they get lost in the so-called complexity. It's just they haven't given it enough time and they haven't learned the simplest way, right? So that's the first issue. The second behavioral finance principle is what's called loss aversion bias. Are you familiar with the concept, mate?
I am, but yeah, share more about it, mate. Yeah.
I'd love to. So loss aversion bias is another principle like Parkinson's law. It's actually very closely related. And what it comes down to is that over thousands of years, we have become deeply wired to be resource guarders. Because go back 10,000 years, right? There were no certainties. We didn't have certainty of a roof over our head or food on the table. There was certainly no refrigerator, right? So the resources we had, we need to carefully guard because that was life or death, right? And that is now intrinsically wired into our thinking, right? And what this basically is, and it's been proven that we feel the emotion of loss twice as significantly as the emotion of gain. And I see this play out every day. And we've created a methodology that we call the wealth pyramid, which is basically 5 stages of financial well-being, which is also supported by 10 mental states. But basically, to give you a crash course on it, the first level is what's called financial battle. I'm sure all of us have experienced some sort of financial battle over the years, right? And in financial battle, our job is to get out of being at a cash flow deficit and basically drowning financially to get to financial comfort, which basically means that our head's above water, but we're treading water. We're not moving forwards, but we're not going backwards. And here's where people get stuck because the loss aversion bias forces us to get to comfort, but there is now an anchor that holds us from going to the next stage, which is financial growth, because growth hurts. It doesn't matter if it's business growth or it's mindset growth or it's financial growth. Growth hurts. It's painful. It's uncomfortable. So what we've got to realize is that if the emotion of loss is twice as significant as the emotion of gain, we must put at least 2 times as much effort into pursuing the gain. Otherwise, we will never overcome that anchor of loss. This is why people get stuck in comfort and have this vicious cycle between battle and comfort their whole life. So to get to growth, we need surplus and we need to make that surplus work for us. We need to be buying assets. We need to be paying down debt. We need to be saving potentially all of that. And we need to do that at enough velocity to get us to financial freedom, which we've already discussed. Own our home, paid off in full, enough passive income to choose what we do with our time. And then stage 5 is financial abundance. And this is where we have more than what we need and we can give back. This is a stage of legacy, of being a hero to other people. This is about elevating your family, elevating your community, elevating causes that are dear to your heart. But you can only do that from a position of freedom. And the issue is that I see so many people try and go from, say, battle or comfort, jumping to abundance, and it doesn't work that way. We need to pay our dues and we need to go through the right process to ensure that we can set those right foundations and overcome that loss aversion bias. And this is the mindset of mastering money.
Yeah, I love that, mate. Very powerful. I love that double effort on the positive side there to eliminate the loss and everything there, and that pyramid. It's very, very powerful. That area there. So let's talk a bit more about diversification here. I think is important because you talked about the three different simple asset classes like businesses, property, shares, right there. And there's different elements of this. What do you think in terms of how we should be diversifying so that we should go there? Like maybe it's not good to put all of our money into shares, right? You know what I mean? Like that, so that we're putting it at at a better velocity, so that we're building it well.
Yes, makes sense. So the big thing we need to understand is that there is no perfect asset class. I have no bias between any of those three primary asset classes, and there are lots of other asset classes. But the reason why I say those three, business, property, and shares, is because throughout history, those are the three asset classes that have been most predictably able to allow people to create financial freedom and financial abundance. And the most other asset classes that are either defensive asset classes or speculative asset classes that take excessive risks. And it's my perspective that we should take the least amount of risk necessary to get to the goal that we want. So what we need to understand is what are the pros and cons of each asset class, so then we can use those pros and cons and blend them together to create a robust portfolio. So the first one is business. If you look at any rich list in the world, the vast majority of people that are there are because of their business interests. And this is the reason why entrepreneurship is so powerful, because we can manufacture wealth. There is no other way that we can take something, an idea, a framework, and a system, and leverage it as much as we can with a business. However, you need to understand the true intrinsic value of your business, not the emotional equity in your business, because I see so many people who think their business is worth a lot and it's worth diddly squat because they haven't set it up as such. So with our clients, we help them build a valuable and saleable business. And that requires us to maximize profitability, reduce key person risk, and maximize the trajectory so somebody else sees that as an investment asset that they would be prepared to buy and pay a premium for it. Second, we acquire other businesses. So I've done over 8 figures in acquisitions. Acquisition is a big part of my wealth building strategy, where I buy undervalued businesses and I roll them into my business, and I use my systems, my framework, my teams in order to elevate the asset value of that business and the profitability of that business. But that's not for everyone, right? So there's plenty of clients that I've got who are in a cash flow business. Maybe they're a consultant, maybe they're a speaker, maybe they just have a solopreneur business, and that's okay. We just need to recognize that your business is there for cash flow. And when it's there for cash flow, we need to take that cash flow and buy assets. So that leads us to property. Now, when we look at property and shares side by side, they've averaged a return about the same, about 9%, okay? The difference is property, we can borrow and we can leverage our money up 10 times. So for example, you could save $100,000, go and borrow $900,000 from the bank. You now control $1 million asset. And if that $1 million property goes up by 5% or $50,000, that's a 50% cash on cash return because you only put in 100,000. So this is the reason why for entrepreneurs, their second biggest holding is typically always real estate. And it's because leverage magnifies their returns. However, property is a liquid and you can't sell a kitchen sink if you need to raise money. And it's frankly a terrible asset for passive income because we've got real estate agent fees, we've got strata fees, we've got insurances, we've got maintenance. Property is one of the most highly taxed assets in the world. So for passive income, it's not great. So then we've got shares, and shares are a bet on somebody else's business. And the great thing about it is that we can buy fractions of that business, and we can also diversify broadly across the whole world using what's called an index fund. And how an index fund works is instead of picking a company like CBA or BHP or Telstra, we can go and bet in the entire share market. So for example, the ASX 300 is the top 300 companies in Australia. And if we bought that index, we would own all 300 of those companies proportionate to their size. So let's say we put in $1,000, we'd have the biggest slice of the biggest company, which I think is CBA at the moment, and we'd have the smallest slice of the 300th company. And the great thing about that is we get the average of however those 300 companies perform. The other great thing, Athin, is that if we buy Australian shares, on average, Australian shares pay a 5% dividend after tax. They've already paid 30% tax on that. So that's equivalent to like a 7 or 8% gross income with no strata, no tenants punching holes in the walls, no issues, right? Sure, there can be volatility, which is what scares most people in the share market. But that then comes down to us understanding behavioral finance and building the right portfolio. So what we do for our clients is we help them build what we call their own investment philosophy. We teach them these asset classes. We help them combine them in a way that aligns with their own investor DNA and make sure that they have peace of mind and certainty around the way that they're allocating their money. And this is how you diversify, and this is how you build a powerful investment philosophy. So a little bit of a rant, mate, but hopefully that was valuable.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. That was very valuable, and I think a lot of people, need to understand all this stuff. And I love the the liquidity of the shares. I think is an important one for people to know, right? Because you can't sell your business tomorrow, you can't sell a property tomorrow if you want to build money. But that that other way of the shares, I think is powerful as long as you're investing in the right ones that have got the least amount of risk. And there's a lot. We won't go into too many strategies, but you can look back and see how these have performed, and then go, okay, let's put the money in there, and it's got the highest level of risk. And I guess let's talk more now around generational wealth. I think this is a great topic here, right? Where you talked before about legacy, right? Like, what do we want to do, for our children or future generations there, so that they have the financial freedom. So, what are your thoughts around how we can create this, for our family and future generations?
Hey, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. I actually just released my third book called The Family Vault, How to Create Generational Wealth and Keep It. Launched it yesterday, in fact, and it's already an international bestseller in 3 categories, which is very, very exciting. But the reason why I wrote it is particularly for first-generation wealthy business owners. And if anybody who's done any research into generational wealth, there's an age-old saying that says, from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. The first generation makes it, the second generation spends it, and then the third generation must start again. And the issue behind this, mate, is that for the vast majority of wealthy individuals who future generations have squandered the wealth, it is because they have transferred the assets without an operating system to govern those assets. And the reason is that for most of us who are self-made, right, we have gone hungry, okay? We have this fire in our belly that, if I think back to my parents, I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to see them suffer anymore. I wanted to be able to create so much abundance and so much success that I would never have to worry about money ever again. And that fire, you can never pass on to that next generation. They will never go hungry because you're not allowed. So you can't teach them the operating system and expect them to run it in the same way. So the fundamental principle of generational wealth is to give them enough so they can do anything, but not so much as they do nothing. And the idea here is that we actually set up a structure that we call the family vault that synthetically passes the need for them to work for the money. There's no silver spoon, there's no handouts. If they turn into little pricks, the money goes to charity, okay? And we make them earn their stripes. And the ideal perspective that we get to, the ideal outcome we get to, is that when they grow up, they turn around and say, Mum and Dad, thanks for everything, but I've got everything I need and I don't need your money. This is the perfect outcome. And we only do that through a couple of things. One, we need to turn the kids into stewards, right? We need to help them realize that the money is not theirs. They are just a keeper of that money for future generations and for future impact. Our watch brand Patek Philippe has this beautiful saying that says, you never own a Patek Philippe, you just take care of it for the next generation, right? And this is the same principle. We do that by creating what we call the 100-year vision, right? And this comes from the Chinese in 1945. So in 1945, basically just after World War II, China was decimated. Mass famine. They were one of the most impoverished nations in the world. And the Chinese Communist Party basically said, we're going to create a 100-year pledge that by 2045, we will be the #1 economic superpower in the world. Now, we're at the end of 2023, I'm sure by the time you guys hear this, will be 2024. And arguably, China's achieved it. They went from the poorest nation in the world to one of the richest, if not the richest in the world. Now, the ethics around that, we could argue, but from a philosophical standpoint, That was very powerful. So as a family, if you can create a 100-year plan, involve your kids in it, and get them to buy into the impact that you want that wealth to have for future generations, then this is how we start creating stewardship. And then the third part is we need to create a family constitution. It is a rule book of much like in a business where you've got a shareholders agreement. What are good leaver clauses, bad leaver clauses? What's everyone's role and responsibility in terms of the family wealth? How are they measured by way of KPIs and performance? And then how are they incentivized or impeded or impacted as a result of their behavior over time? And it's bringing this system together and implementing it and treating generational wealth like a business is how families like the Rockefellers have now gone on, I think, 13 generations of generational wealth. And these are the secrets that most of us don't know. And if you're interested more, feel free to go check out my book.
Yeah, awesome, mate. That was a very, very powerful section. And I love that family constitution, thing that you said there about how you can, this is the path. And if you do or don't do things, and, there's ramifications, right, to your actions, like anything, like in a business and everything like that. So you're teaching the way how to think, and as well as, that building that legacy moving forward. So love it, mate. And I think another thing here about this is protecting the wealth, right? And I think more from like a structure. Let's talk about it perspective here. So I know you also have an accounting, financial background as well. And I think this is important, for people to understand about potential options, I guess, of doing things. Obviously, there's trusts, right, and other structures that we can do, especially let's talk about from an Australia perspective now, because every country is a little bit different. But how do we ensure that we keep our, can keep our wealth in, probably more from a tax effective way? Not that this is necessarily advice or anything like that, but just things for people to think about that they can, talk to their accountant about as well.
Yes. So there's a few things we need to keep in mind in terms of creating long-term wealth. And fundamentally, there are three problems that people need to solve here. And the issue is that you need to solve them up front, because when we're accumulating assets, we need to structure them appropriately up front, because restructuring them is very, very expensive. In some cases, you can't do it. And therefore, it's too late. So the first thing is for tax efficiency. Now, I don't believe in tax minimization. I believe in tax optimization, because tax is a consequence of making money. Okay. My goal is every single year, I want to pay more tax. And the bigger my tax bill is, the bigger my smile is, because every single year I'm winning. And I see so many people begrudgingly paying their tax bill. And it's a fundamentally wrong mindset, because it means that they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. Let's say the government's always going to take 30% of your money, right? 30 cents out of every dollar. That means you've got 70 cents out of every dollar. You've got the majority of that money that you're accumulating. But what's important is having flexibility of tax outcome. So the idea is we want to make sure that we've got an asset structure that provides us with that flexibility, so we're not paying any bonuses to the ATO, because let's face it, they don't deserve it, right? Now, the second part we want to make sure is that we protect against the unforeseen, whether it be litigation or whether it be other unforeseen events. And the idea is we want to make sure we've got a tax structure that provides us with protection and limits liability against the unforeseen, because as business owners, we do have a higher likelihood of litigation compared to other people who are in society. So we want to make sure that these structures provide us with the control, but we've got to make sure that we're using the appropriate structures, because I've seen some structures implemented that can actually cause other unforeseen issues or have excessive costs without providing the value. But the third part, and probably the biggest risk, mate, is liquidity. We see so many people accumulate these massive portfolios and become asset rich and cash poor. The number one killer of generational wealth is the actual generational wealth transfer and the inability for the inheritors of the estate to be able to cover the taxes that happen as a result of transferring of those assets. And what that ultimately means is those assets must be sold, and then we end up liquidating the family wealth. And then once it's liquidated, then that causes a lot of other flow-on issues. So what's critically important is that we plan for the appropriate liquidity, and we ensure that if there are going to be tax consequences at certain points in time, that we have the means in order to fund it. The problem is with most accountants, they're reactive with this. So if your accountant hasn't reviewed your tax structure in the last 12 months, if you don't have a simple one-page tax structure diagram that explains what you've got in place, how money flows, and why it is in your best interests, you need to reevaluate your accounting relationship, because we see so many accountants who profess to be tax experts, but they don't provide these very simple tools to their clients, and it can be costing them, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost opportunity.
Yeah, I love it, mate. Great way to think about how we protect it in all these different ways. And just one more specific thing, because I hear some areas, and you talked about this, about like maybe too complex and the way it's sort of set up, where you could have one like discretionary trust, right, where you can choose where the money goes, and maybe a lot of your businesses are connected to that. But then some people say, oh, I want to create other ones for properties and do it like that. But is it,
Yes.
do you think, from what you're seeing, right, with people, of what there's potential ramifications, is it better to put everything under sort of one trust where everything sort of flows into something when you get, maybe it's easier to then adjust things? Or is it better to split it maybe from a protection perspective in different asset classes and things like that?
Really great question. And look, the answer to that is it really depends. And I think what's important, mate, is that, like, with ultra high net worth families, they sometimes have hundreds of companies and trusts in their corporate structure. And the idea is that we use a structure based on the benefits that it provides that must outweigh the costs and complexity associated with it. And we've got to realize that the more complexity, the more chance there is for things to go wrong, because mistakes happen, right? So to give you an example, in my own personal affairs, I have a family trust, and my family trust owns shares to my holding company. In my holding company, that's where I hold all of my IP, and I hold all of the excess profits of all of my various businesses, and it owns the shares of all of the businesses and investments that I have. So when we do acquisitions, when I get a stake in a particular business, when I make an investment, or for my core trading businesses, all of my shares are owned by that holding company, and that isolates risk, protects intellectual property, and that does no business with any other entity. All of my trading businesses are standalone, and the reason is so I want them to stand on their own 2 feet. And if I ever wanted to, I could sell one of them off at any particular point in time. One of my businesses, I'm actually in the process of selling at the moment, and because we've structured it that way, it makes it very clean and very straightforward. But then what I've also got is that I've got a bucket company off my family trust. So any excess profits I can put there and have a guaranteed tax rate of 30%. I never pay any more than 30%. That accumulates franking credits, which I can then use in the future to offset and distribute out if I'm ever in a low income, or I have family members that are a lower income. And then I also, from time to time, use what I call a special purpose vehicle in order to acquire a business or a property, in order to maximize my borrowing capacity. Because this is often the biggest challenge that we see, mate, is that for business owners, our ability to accelerate our wealth is limited by how much the banks will lend us. And the issue is that if we don't structure that debt appropriately, all of that debt is considered, and most banks put a 2 to 3 percent risk buffer on top. So it means our debt ceiling is a diminishing ceiling for every bit of debt that we get. However, if we use a special purpose vehicle to acquire an asset, any debt inside that entity, if the entity is cash flow positive, is excluded from some bank servicing. So what that can potentially mean is that we can have an infinite borrowing capacity, and that may require us to set up a special purpose vehicle for each one of those acquisitions. But with some extra cost, we potentially can continually increase our borrowing capacity. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if we have a structure implemented that adds more value than it costs, and we have a system in place to manage the complexity, then we can set up as many entities as we like, but it must add value.
Yeah, I love that, mate. Very, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, because that was high level information there that you shared for people to understand, going, this is what the possibilities are, and just really how to think about it. And excuse me, I think the best thing here is, like, what I do with my accountant is I'm always going in with, this is what I'm thinking, and asking a lot of questions. And what Jackson's sharing with us today is so you can think like this and ask the right questions, and then you can determine the knowledge of the accountant. Can he answer these questions? Has he got reasons for this, or do you have to go to somebody else that's going to be able to answer these questions and set you up correctly, right, in what you're wanting to do with your outcome? So
Exactly right, mate. And this is back on my previous point, is that no one's going to love your money and be as passionate about this as you are. So it's your responsibility to learn enough so then you can ask these questions. But it is also important that you're not the one that's having to constantly drive those relationships, right? You should be hopefully working with individuals who can bring those ideas to the table proactively, and basically educate you on these things and take you on the journey. And this is a lot of the work that we do with our clients, because maybe they have the knowledge, but they're just too busy. And our job is to make sure that they've got that forward-facing plan, they're reviewing their tax structure, they've got their 20-year roadmap, or potentially the 100-year roadmap if they're focusing on building generational wealth. and that we're able to bring this together concisely so they can make the most out of the resources their business is producing and make their wealth work harder for them. And that's our value proposition and how we've been so successful in what we do.
Yeah, love it, mate. Really powerful there. And yeah, powerful episode today, mate. You've shared so much gold with us here today. And as we're starting to wrap up, what one key piece of advice would you like to give to all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
I think the important thing here is, mate, is that everyone's running their own race. And it is important for you to quantify where you're at and focus on what the next best thing is for you to do. So we've covered a lot of things here today. Not all of these things are going to be the right next thing. So what I've developed is I've actually developed a 40-point financial performance scorecard, which is designed to help you evaluate where you're at right now, and then give you the next 1, 2, or 3 things that you should be focusing on to help you improve your position. And the interesting thing is that we've done this with thousands, and the average score is about 18 out of 40, which means most business owners are below average financially. So guys, if you go to wealthhealthcheck.com.au, that's wealthhealthcheck.com.au, you'll get access to all of my books, a whole heap of resources, and also the scorecard. It'll take you 5 minutes to do it. It'll give you some clarity around what your next best moves are. And it'll also give you a customized report with recommendations of what you should be focusing on and what your next best moves are. So feel free to go check that out. And hopefully that helps you, give you some direction of how you make the most of 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Love that. Very powerful, and definitely check out that Wealth Health Check, everybody, because you can see Jackson knows his stuff in all these areas to help you know what your next step is on your wealth creation journey. And yeah, we connected through our networks. I learned about your awesome journey. Yeah, from starting as the financial advisor, wealth consultant, business owner, mentor, and now being the CEO and co-founder of Aureus Financial. You're an awesome guy, mate. So knowledgeable, so much gold shared here with us today. I'm sure you continue to help service businesses understand the language of money and manufacture financial freedom for themselves and their families. Very grateful we connected. Look forward to working with you. So Jackson, how can people find you and get in contact with you?
Yep. So feel free to look me up on social media. I'm big on all of the major platforms. So to search for Jackson Millan. You can also check out my business, Aureus Financial, which is AUREUS financial.com.au. And if we can help in any way, feel free to reach out. Feel free to complete the scorecard. That'll give us a bit of an idea of where you're at. And we can have a conversation around how you can improve and what your next best moves are. And happy to support. So don't be a stranger.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Definitely check out Jackson there on his socials website, the Wealth Health Check and everything there with the scorecard. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, mate, interviewing you. And thank you for being on my show.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to this show where we talk about everything on business growth. And please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Athin Cassiotis, or visit my website, athincassiotis.com. If you want to grow and scale your business, you can reach out to me on any platform to see if we're a good fit. I completely agree with you, or do I? The only way you know is if you tune in next time. So until next time, remember that our business grows when we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. So remember to design your growth and results.